conscious versus unconscious behavior. What's the difference? The structure of the mind, it's divided into different things, your conscious and your subconscious. And again, I get most of my research from Dr. Bruce Lipton as well as other formalities, but he's my favorite. And he goes on to explaining that we're actually functioning 95% from our subconscious mind. And most people don't realize that. And as you would have got from the podcast, Be the Lighthouse, I've explained a little bit more how that works and gave the example about driving a car. You're not always conscious of what you're doing when you're driving. You're driving, but you're not paying particular attention to all the little details. They're happening in a subconscious format. So the conscious mind, that's the analytical mind. That's where we plan, we think about things, we make decisions. It's very analytical and very logical. It's where we function from our primary source of will. But we only function 5% of our day in that presence of our mind awareness. The subconscious mind on the opposite side, it's the automatic pilot. Okay, so basically what that means is that 95% of the time of our day, we are just functioning from autopilot. And it's in the subconscious that we're just replaying these programs and learned behaviors that we had. So there's the difference between the two. And I use the analogy of like a computer. Our brain is a computer. The subconscious mind is the pre-installed programs that we developed from an early age. So those programs run automatically, like a startup in a computer or a virus checker. They just run naturally. So whatever was pre-programmed in our early years becomes our subconscious mind, and we tend to function from that place 95% of the time during every day-to-day stuff. So where does programming work? We already said that it happens in early childhood, and anywhere between the ages up until about 6 or 7, that's where it happens. And you find most kids in that age, their brainwaves are at delta and theta. As an adult at theta, you are pretty much asleep. But if you've seen other podcasts about Jose Silva's mind control methods, and the alpha level is where we can pretty much reprogram subconscious thoughts through meditation, active meditation. So kids are in the delta and theta phase, so there's really no filter at that age with the information they absorb. They just absorb everything. They look at role modeling, your behavior, your reactions, visually, your physical activity, like small tweaks. They are just absorbing copious amount of information, which is why you can learn a language very easily at such a young age. In fact, multiple languages. I was very blessed. I grew up speaking Portuguese. And when my mother put me in preschool, I was in 3, 4 years old, and I couldn't speak a word of English, but apparently picked it up without a problem. And in the early years, I learned to speak Afrikaans, Portuguese, a bit of Italian, English, and I didn't have any confusion. There was a little bit of a structural difference. But even today, if I'm speaking in Portuguese, because I haven't done it for so long, I find that if I'm thinking about speaking in Portuguese, it's very hard for me to get the words out. I will speak in Portuguese and I'm trying to organize the translation. But if I allow my mind to completely calm down and just speak relaxed, eu posso falar em português sem dificuldade. É muito mais fácil para mim falar em português quando não estou a pensar nas palavras que vou usar. It's much easier for me to speak in Portuguese when I'm not thinking about the words, when I just allow whatever's been pre-downloaded to just come out and talk. So at that age, when you're absorbing all the information, you just accept it as absolute truth. It is what it is, such as Santa's real. The tooth fairy is going to swap your teeth for money. For a child, everything is real and there's no differentiation between reality and fiction. They are just like these massive absorbing things. And the biggest problem that I find in those early years is the unawareness that we have of how that also affects the child's personal identity. So a lot of that downloaded information comes from that perspective as well. Words that we can say to a young child when they're not at the point where they can consciously understand why you're saying things, they absorb it as absolute. Simple things like telling a young child, you don't deserve that. They don't understand what it is and the consequences of the behavior. They just register, I don't deserve this. I'm not deserving. And that's a very simple example, but you can see it carries a lot of weight. So what you'll find is you'll find kids start to pick up from their caregivers, their parents, certain behavioral characteristics. They will act and perform in certain ways. They will react in certain ways that mimic their own environment. So, as much as they have their own character and how they express that, a big portion of that is learned by watching multiple people. And what you'll find is that they will take in a little bit of everybody and display it almost at the same time. So, what is the actual impact of this whole situation? And really, the impact that this has, if we approach it with this unawareness that we have, that we think we're functioning from a cognitive perspective, that we are totally in control, is the anxiety that it causes and the stress. Like certain stressful and anxious environments in a young child can actually embed this type of programming at such an early age. So for the rest of your life, you will be experiencing these feelings of nervousness and anxiety in normal situations. But that's a pre-downloaded program that when your body gets the stimulus of that environment, it registers that that's the program it has to run. If you run the risk of embedding these permanent programs, it's these programs that shape our emotional responses, our coping strategies to situations in life. It can go as far as affecting your self-worth and your own personal beliefs, such as we mentioned, I'm not worthy. And at this stage, I'd like to mention that the subconscious mind, even though it's like an embedded program, it's pretty much like a replay automatic machine. So these programs will be repeatedly played in your subconscious mind at a daily level. It's constantly getting reinforced even without you realizing it. So we understand what the subconscious mind is now and how it affects us. But what's the magnitude of the subconscious influence? Like how much does it really influence us and can affect our day to day? So we did mention obviously that we spend 95 to like 99% of our subconscious mind. But because these things are replaying in our subconscious mind, we're not even aware that it's happening. And that can be a really bad thing because we think we're in control, but we have these programs underlying us. So they're preempting our emotional responses to stressful situations. And the certain belief systems that we have, we tend to structure our reality around those belief systems that weren't in fact our own belief systems to start with. And I'm not talking about what's factual and what's not. We're talking about like the sense of self-worth and self-belief. The subconscious mind is so much more powerful than the conscious mind. There are millions of nerve impulses per second in the subconscious mind compared to the conscious mind. It's quite clear to see that the subconscious mind is a million times more powerful than the conscious mind. Being that powerful, it drives our behavior. And how does it drive our behavior? Simply because 95% of it is automated, so we're not even aware that this behavior is happening. So it's just able to continue. In a situation where you're stressful and you react to the situation, you think you're in control. It's only later on, if you take the time to reflect back on that situation, that you become aware of, like, oh, hold on. I wasn't really upset about that. I was upset about this. So why did I react like that? And what triggered that? And like, as an example, if we spend our whole lives being corrected and but in a negative format, then when someone gives us a form of constructive criticism, our initial response is to hear that as an attack. And then we think we're the victim, but it's our subconscious mind listening to that stimulus, listening to that signals, and automatically putting a playback and response, activating a certain code so that your responses becomes something that was already pre-existing. It's old programs and habits from early childhood that actually run our day to day. How do we change that? How can we become aware of that so that we can better perform in our situations and become the person we want to be and attract the people we want around us and have the life that we desire, that we think we desire? So the beauty about all this is that the more work you do it and you realize that your goals tend to shift a little bit, because what you believed was what would make you happy in the process of self-analyzing, you realize actually there's other things that would bring me more joy. And the more awareness we create to our own belief systems and our responses to the environment, the better understanding we become about who we are and what we want. And the better that understanding gets for us, the more motivation and inspiration we feel to continue on that road. So in order to change these belief systems and programming that have been instilled in us, there's three ways. One is the José Silva mind control method, which is through meditation, active meditation. It's frequencies. It's about bringing your mind down to a certain level of awareness, calming the brain, calming the body, allowing you to be receptive, and then reinstalling new programs and belief systems, either with a facilitator, helping you or guiding you through the meditation, or you yourself with enough practice can actually do that and reprogram certain things in your head. Habituation through repetition is the other way. That is when you do something so often that your subconscious starts to learn it automatically, such as driving. We never really, we just drove and didn't, we thought about it in the beginning, and then we practiced and practiced, and you got to a point you've done it for so long, it becomes habitual. So this is why discipline is such an important part in achieving your goals, because it's applying the discipline to these habits that you want to achieve in order to reprogram your subconscious. And the third way is energy psychology. So basically, it's a way of activating the brain to be in a process of super learning. You can actually rewrite programs in under 10 minutes. And there's heaps of different energy psychology processes. If you jump on Dr. Bruce Lipton's website, you'll be able to see a few there. It just primes the system into like a high-speed download that you can just download and overwrite all programs. There's about 20 different types in there. The reason why this is so important as well, it shifts our perspective from being a victim to a creator. And when we are constantly functioning from our subconscious mind, I personally believe we are at the mercy of our subconscious. So we already have the energy of relinquishing control to our subconscious and become a victim of the situation, which then perpetuates this victim mentality. So the more work we do into self-actualizing and self-awareness, the more we take back of that control, the more knowing we have of ourselves, our goals, and what we would like, what we would like to improve, and what is working. And this in itself, now, without even trying, is going to shift you into a mentality of being a creator of your own destination, your own future. Just doing this process and being more aware of the reprogramming of the subconscious mind, I really do believe that we can go into that creative mindset as opposed to living life like, oh my God, everything's happening to me. So like Dr. Bruce Lipton puts, we are not the victims of our genetics. We are not victims of our personalities or our characters. We say, this is just who I am. And we accept that as blanketed. But we actually haven't really understood what is really me and what has been pre-downloaded. So for him, genetics are kind of like the blueprint of your body. The reader of the blueprint is the mind. And the mind becomes the all-powerful contractor of the body. And if it's functioning from a subconscious state with bad programs, then it just opens the world up to disease, which Dr. Bruce Lipton loves the word dis-ease as opposed to disease. It's just a dis-ease. You're not easy. So once we realize that, we can realize that we've relinquished our own physiological health to our subconscious as well. So I hope that gives you guys a little bit more of a background between the conscious and subconscious mind. And I'm happy if this podcast just opens the awareness into the possibility that the better future awaits you just by looking at your subconscious mind and reprogramming what's in there to what you like. We do spend so much time focusing on our cognitive conscious mind, and we do affirmation and all those things, but it won't work unless we can reinstill that in a subconscious format and embed that program. Hope this opened the door and you got something out of it. And if you think anyone would like it, please don't hesitate to like, share, and leave a comment. Catch you all next time.